The public is waking up, and I think we need to continue to wake up to the way the government is supposed to work, the way it works.
For the people, by the people.
Yes, and that's what it's supposed to be. That's not what we're getting all the time right now. And the more people that come forward and talk about the corruption, because we got a process, and on paper it works. It's a beautiful process, our American system. Checks and balances, the jury system, that's the people's check on the government. It works. But when you start messing with the pieces and putting middlemen, and you start, taking bribes and affecting the contracts, it doesn't work. And people see that, but people are afraid to come forward because they're going to get punished. And it kind of goes, if you see something that's wrong, you need to talk to someone about it. You don't necessarily have to go post it on Facebook, but go talk to, if you have a friend that's a lawyer, family member that's a lawyer, talk to them. Talk to someone you trust. But the more people are informed, the better our community will be.
What's up, listeners? This is Molina, and I got with me Javier Pena, the man, the myth, the legend, known in some parts as the troublemaker. How you doing?
Doing all right. Doing good.
But usually when people mention your name, you're typically known as the public corruption fighter down here, like in the Rio Grande Valley.
Yeah.
Am I incorrect in saying that?
No, I mean, yeah. I have unintentionally and accidentally wandered into that specialty. Back in 2012, I started some of these cases, and it just took off from there.
And what made you want to pursue these types of big corruption type cases?
Kind of goes way back to childhood. I don't like bullies. I was always smaller than my classmates, but I like to fight. Like I do now. I just do it with words now. And I got into a lot of fights in school whenever I would get bullied or friends would get bullied. And so I've always had that in me. My last fight like that was in college, defending somebody else. So I got approached by some friends who had a friend that was getting retaliated against in one of these western cities. I took on that case, and then I took on the case of against Lupe Trevino on the public finance corruption, and it started exposing that, and it just blew up from there. And going through these cases, and it still happens, we're seeing a lot of this stuff over in the western side. We see some everywhere, actually. But the people in power put pressure on the employees, like in school districts where I've done a lot of my work. They put pressure on the teachers, on the custodial staff, on the maintenance staff, the bus drivers, and they put people in high positions that have large families and get a lot of votes. And anyone that doesn't go along with that, doesn't bring out the vote, doesn't support the people that are currently in power, well, they're fired, they're terminated, they're transferred, they're demoted. And that sends a very powerful message to everyone else that if you don't go along, you're going to go away. And when that kind of stuff happens, if you have the power to stop it,
they call Javier Pena,
and
do something about it.
And it's something that any lawyer can do, but
not every lawyer, because there's very few lawyers down here that basically have the, I don't know what you would call it. Would it be guts, something? But to actually take on that David and Goliath battle, take on Goliath, very rare, right?
Yeah. It is a lonely specialty in law because, there aren't a lot of lawyers that want to get into those fights because there's a lot of downsides to it. There's a lot of repercussions. There's a lot of retaliation, and you don't have a whole lot of friends doing this kind of thing. But it's the kind of thing, can I sleep at night if I know someone's being bullied and I can do something about it and fix it, or at least protect them to a certain extent? We're either the good guy or we're the bad guys.
And have you ever, when you take on these big cases, have you ever felt like maybe I might get blacklisted or something?
Oh yeah.
Have you felt like you've gotten?
Oh yeah. I would get death threats. I was followed for a while. I had a brick thrown through my window. I had with Lupe Trevino, I was told by other police officers that were friends that he was trying to convince them to plant stuff on me that he could stop the lawsuit. So yeah, I had to be real careful. I started having drivers, and they told me basically, I'm fine here, but if you go to the west side, we don't know what's going to happen. So I had someone drive me there and back. It was stressful.
Oh, to say the least. But is there a big like economic incentive for you?
No.
On taking
No,
like
corruption
these
cases
cases?
aren't very profitable. Now, you can find some. So I've had, in that, I don't want to say I haven't made money fighting these cases. I have, but like wrongful termination, political retaliation, there are hard cases to prove, especially down here. They're typically, you end up in federal court, and the requirements are a lot different up there, and the judges down here don't really like those kinds of cases. So you really got to put on a very strong case at the outset before even going through discovery. So it's hard. And it's hard because it's hard to find witnesses. And I've had a lot of people say, hey, this is what's going on, but I don't want to be called to testify. I won't testify because they're going to go after me. They're going to go after my family. So it's hard to get the evidence to prove the case. And then in a wrongful termination, so usually it's like the custodial staff, the maintenance staff, bus drivers, that type of salary range. So you're capped on what you can recover. So typically you try to get multiple, and typically they do retaliate against a big group. So you try to get as big of a group as possible, get as much evidence as you can, and you can make a good recovery that way. But just the one employee versus the school district can be really hard.
And then like, do you typically settle like those cases for like millions of dollars or?
Well, no. Typically, you want the employee to get their job back. That's the first thing you want. That's not always possible or not always feasible. So then, in some cases, you will settle for a year wage or this or that, and plus the attorney's fees. But on most of the big ones, yeah, there were only settlements after we went up the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court and back down.
And then like even when you win, there's no one like building like statutes or efficacies like in your honor, not like that, right?
No. I make the more cases I litigate, the more enemies I make. It seems.
In the newspaper about you taking on voter fraud, right?
Yeah,
and
taking on several of those.
I read one story about where you took down like a mailman that was what was he doing?
So back in 2014, in the elections back then, and we discovered it in one of the school board races over in La Jolla. There was a mailman that serviced the Mission area and parts of like La Jolla. He was letting one side know, whoever paid him, where the mail-in ballots were going to go, when they were delivered, where to pick them up and intercept them. So I had someone come forward, tell me this is what was going on, what could they do, and that's not really something that I could sue for. I told her, like, this is not a civil thing. I can't protect you as a civil attorney. What I can do is point you in the right direction and see if either the federal government, because it was a postal worker, so it's their jurisdiction, see if we can stop this. So I set up the meeting. I represented her in that meeting, and they were able to get the evidence to bring down that mailman that was selling the mail-in ballots.
And in your opinion, Mr. Pena, do you believe that there is an election problem down here in the Valley? Because, you hear the Republicans, it's a hotbed of election fraud down there in Texas, and people are just committing all types of election fraud. What's your thoughts?
Yes, there is a lot of it. And it happens in a lot of different ways, and it's very rarely prosecuted. And even when we bring it up, I remember sending file to the former DA, Rene Guerra, and his response was basically he wasn't going to prosecute it, and it's small potatoes. And that's why it happens so much. No one gets punished. Now, that's changing now, with the mailman and several arrests for vote harvesting, and with the new laws out there on the voter harvesting, that's something that I think is changing, but it's changing slowly. And it's kind of ingrained now through whether it's the mail-in ballots, picking people up to go vote and then paying them to vote. That's a big scam. So it's not all just the mail-in ballots, but they have these little organizations. They have little pachangas, barbecue, this and that. Hey, meet up here, then we'll go vote. So people show up, they get out of their cars, they get in someone else's car, drive to the polling place. They're told who to vote for, then they go back, and then they get paid once they go back, and they can prove that they actually voted. And that's something that we uncovered in sworn testimony in the election contest case we had, last summer, between the candidate and the incumbent and the winning candidate for Precinct 3.
How do you, I guess, start off by saying this is how we're going to attack the election fraud case, like trying to prove that these votes are illegal. It seems like if there's so many people, it's like an uphill battle.
It's real difficult, and it really depends on the method in which you believe the election fraud occurred, whether it was through the mail-in, then you need to go through the ballots, mail-in ballots, match the signatures, check the address, check to see whether they were assisted, whether they actually qualified for assistance. And, a lot of these times you'll see someone that assisted hundreds of people. That's kind of a clue. It's not conclusive evidence that there's fraud going on, but it's a red flag that why are you helping 100 people? That's kind of evidence that it's possible that you grabbed a whole stack of mail-in ballots and filled it out and just mailed it in. And we've had cases where the people, the politiqueras that are handling these mail-in ballots will just go and drop them off at the elections department, not in the mail the way they're supposed to, but just go drop them off at the elections office.
That's like pretty like blatant.
Very blatant. Like there's no postmark, there's no anything. Then you have the people that are actually paid to vote. That one you have to go get the affidavits. So it really depends on the method that you suspect. And in most elections, and it's not everyone. I don't want people to think that every politician does this, but it is rampant enough that you need to be on the lookout for it.
Kind of explain to our viewers what this notion of a politiquero or what a
politiquera,
politiquera is.
That's a campaign worker that is paid to get out the vote. Now, originally, and just because you're a politiquera doesn't mean you're doing something illegal. Usually that's people that help you do the block walking, help you get the register people to vote, get the information out, and just spread the message. That's what a politiquera is supposed to do. What some of these people do instead, though, is they go and collect information, drive people to polls, tell them who to vote for, or fill out the mail-in ballots for them. And they do it for money, and that's where the problem is. It's supposed to be for, usually the politiqueras and politiqueros started as campaign volunteers, and then it just kind of morphed into this racket.
Like growing up, when the first time I ever heard the term politiquero or politiquera, I'm like, that's just like the well-liked aunt or well-liked uncle in the community. Like,
right.
He's just
right. And that's fine. But when that well-liked aunt then gets paid to manipulate votes, that's where we get into a problem. Mm-hmm. But that's also hard to prove.
Oh, extremely hard to prove. I wouldn't even know how you would approach that.
Yeah, you either have to catch them in a lie or talk to the voters they talk to and hope that some of them are honest. But typically, they're afraid they're going to get in trouble too, so they don't know anything. So it's difficult.
I don't want to say too much, but like one of the first times that I voted, I was in college and I found myself in a van with a cheeseburger heading to.
Was it a white van?
It was. Yeah, it was. I'm like, wow, a cheeseburger to go vote. Let's. Now, mind you, they weren't telling me who to vote for, but they were like, "Hey, vote. Yeah,"
and that's fine. That's why it's difficult. Is you have to prove that they actually influenced the decision and told them who to vote for, and then gave them something. Now, the cheeseburger, the rules have changed with all that. Now you can't offer food, you can't do any of that. But back then, it was one of those things. Oh, it's a small little thing. No one thinks about it. It wasn't really illegal. But when you offer anything of value for your vote, that's a crime.
Breaking news today, the city or former mayor of the city of Edinburg came back not guilty.
On all charges.
On everything. Did you see that one coming?
Honestly, having talked to people on both sides of that, and just a disclaimer, my brother was second chair on that case, so just put that out there. Well, I think there were a lot of problems with that case, and it doesn't just stem from this specific set of facts, but the way these issues have been handled in the past. We've seen a lot of these complaints that people are running in locations they don't live in, and they're voting in other ones, and nothing's ever been done. It's been okay. The elections department is cool with it. Our department is cool with it, as long as you have an intent. The definition of residency on these laws is so wishy-washy that it's really hard to prove someone violated it. Now, the other problem that I know of is most of the witnesses that the state was using against Molina, when they first gave statements, said, no, Molina didn't do this. Then when they were threatened with prosecution, they changed the story. It's like, oh, no, he did. This is what he told us. So could they have been lying the first time and then telling the truth yet? Now, yes. But when you have all the people that change their story not getting indicted, and then the people who wouldn't change their story getting indicted, a jury can easily see that they may be changing their story because of fear of prosecution. And then you add on to the story, who did the report, how the investigation was handled. There was enough there to poke holes. But even with that, this is such a high profile case. It's divided the city of Edinburg like tremendously. You have the Molina camp and the Palacios camp. And
that's one thing that I found really weird, right? Because people post all types of crazy stuff on social media. Some people like even have crazy podcasts. However, with the mayor's trial and what was going on, there was hardly like any like social media people posting that like what's going on.
Yeah, I was surprised. Except for Bernice from the Monitor doing her feed on Twitter, there was very little coverage of it.
And I was thinking this is probably one of the most important trials in Hidalgo County like history, because it attacks that one like axiom where people says my vote doesn't matter, it's all corrupt. This is
this was big news, and for whatever reason, and it wasn't covered very heavily. But I think the state may have also known that they had some problems with their case. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not to take anything away from Carlos or from Jaime. They did a great job, and I didn't go watch it, but I was watching Bernice's Twitter updates on it, and they brought up some really good points on the definition and just what I talked about, the witnesses changing stories after being threatened with prosecution. And in a criminal case, all you have to prove is reasonable doubt. So this case, I don't think, was handled properly by the state from the get-go, but they're also limited in what they can do because they have to deal with the facts they have. They can't do too much. It's not like us civil lawyers. They can just amend our pleadings a little bit and bring in new facts. It is what it is. So they got to run with it. But from the get-go, I thought it's 50-50. It just depends. Honestly, I think it came down to who was on the jury. So I think the defense did a really good job on the voir dire and selecting the proper jury for this. And then they presented it well, it seems like.
What was interesting that I found was that one rule where they say never put your client on the stand in a criminal case, plead the fifth.
It was risky, but I think it paid off in this case.
Yeah, putting him on the stand. And I read some of his testimony in the newspaper article, and I'm like, wow, he comes off as a very likable person.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a politician.
He's a politician.
Of course he's going to be likable. I mean, Lupe Trevino was one of the most charismatic people I've ever met. Doesn't mean anything. But I think they developed the case well enough prior to Molina taking the stand that I think they felt comfortable putting him on the stand to explain his intent. And they had enough black and white defenses, as far as the definition and everything else, that at that point, and it's and I haven't practiced a lot of criminal law since I was a brand new baby lawyer.
Well, of course you can't practice criminal law because the minute you walk into any courtroom, the first thing on someone's mind is, where's the corruption?
Where's the corruption? What was I saying? Once you set up everything, and you got the jury thinking, okay, this could be a messed up case. Now, that's a hard decision. Do I put the client on? Because if it goes bad, it goes really bad. And it just has to, one little thing has to go wrong. So I can only imagine how much prep time they took, preparing the witness to make sure he doesn't go off topic. Don't let them anger you. Don't let them trick you. Don't let them, get you to lose your temper. But I think in this case, it was one of those cases where we need him to explain himself to this jury. We have all the defenses over here. We've got the definition. We got the investigation problems. We got all these things. The jury's going to have to hear from him. If they really are going to believe he didn't do anything wrong, they have to hear from him. And it's not a case like a murder case or an assault case where the jury doesn't know who he is. They already know him. I'm sure most of them have already heard about it on social media, the news, Channel 5, Channel 4, the Monitor, everything. So it's not like they were going to hide. I think it was a bigger risk to not call him, but it was a gutsy move. And luckily it paid off, for the lawyers at least.
Really gutsy, because you never know what the prosecution might bring in to make your client look stupid, on that stand. Here's his girlfriend from 4th grade. Well, what do you think of him? Oh, he's horrible.
I'm sure they limited all that out, but
or at least you try.
Right. You bring something up, just gets them off balance.
Yeah.
And once you get a witness off balance, and you do enough trial work too, that you get a witness off balance, you just keep attacking and attacking and attacking, and they'll fall apart.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's risky. You can prep your client as much as you want, but they don't do this every day like we do. So it's easier for a lawyer to put a witness off balance than it is for the witness to mess with the lawyer. And like depositions is the big time for civil lawyers. That's usually when it happens. I had a feeling after seeing the cross or seeing the coverage on the cross, when it started, I was like, I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to pull it off, or at least the defense, and that the state had it in the bag. But the more I saw as the reporting happened, the chances of an acquittal in my mind started going up and up and up. And when they hit the investigators with the definition, and then with the district clerk going in, and the elections administrator, and those people all wanted, the testimony we got from all of them, I was like, holy crap, they can actually pull this off. And I just didn't know where the jury was. Not being in the courtroom, not seeing the jury's faces and their reactions to things. It's hard to tell. I mean, reading the updates on Twitter is very different than being in the courtroom and seeing the reactions of people.
Well, I was reading all of the updates, and I was and the Monitor articles, and I'm like, he's done. It's over. It's over. But then when they put on their the defense started putting on their case, and they raised
it's flipped, yeah.
What did they call it? It's the mistake of law defense.
Right.
And I was like, wow. What were your thoughts when you saw,
and that's a dangerous tactic too, but I think it was effective in this case because it is a very legally specific, this isn't the typical criminal case. This is a very statute specific criminal offense. So it's not like trying to argue ignorance of the law, because we all know ignorance of the law is not an excuse. But mistake of law can be, especially when it's vague and it's been applied differently in different circumstances. Now you've got a shot, and they made it work. Carlos and Jaime did a good job doing that.
Yeah, wow. I'm a huge fan of yours just because there's very few lawyers that have the guts to take on Donald Trump. And I think you're one of the few lawyers that I've met that has actually sued like Donald Trump and the U.S.
Well, indirectly, indirectly, yes. We didn't specifically name him in the lawsuit, but I'm assuming you're talking about the private fence case in Mission.
Yeah,
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it, or?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it because it's still in litigation.
Oh, it's still.
But essentially, this group, the We Build the Wall people, who most of them have been convicted of fraud already in New York, and Bannon was charged and then he was pardoned, which, if anyone that knows the way pardons work, that means you admit you did it. You're just not going to get punished for it.
And that whole Build the Wall thing, that was we're not going to have the federal government build a wall. We're going to collect money from people and make this
make our own wall. Yeah. And the original idea was we're going to make this wall and then donate it, but they didn't, or donate the money. And then they realized, no, the law doesn't allow that. Then we'll donate the wall. And again, that doesn't always work with the federal government. It doesn't work that way. So they went around looking for private property that they can build this wall. And based on the evidence we have right now, they were looking to build it right next to the Butterfly Center. Now, the owner of that small strip of land right next to the Butterfly Center said no. He doesn't want to get in the middle of this, no me metes en tus pedos kind of thing. And then he said the guy next to me might be willing to sell. And so they went to them and they cut a deal to build this wall. And then they started defaming the Butterfly Center, saying that they were involved in human trafficking. They're in league with the cartels. They're doing this. They're doing that. There are dead bodies all over the Butterfly Center. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like a place where the Girl Scouts go and do little retreats. And then We Build the Wall admitted in federal court that they are just the social media cheerleaders for Fisher Industries, which is the contractor that built the wall. And what it looks like is this was a ploy to get a lot of notoriety, get in the press a lot, and so that they can then get contracts from the federal government to build actual government walls. And so they were just, saying whatever they need to say to make Donald Trump happy. And then he was able to give them contracts, and they made a bunch of money on. They made billions of dollars on government contracts, and they're still building some walls. The wall over in Mission is falling apart as we speak.
Well, that's what happens when you go with the lowest bidder. I mean, that's
the lowest, least qualified bidder. Yes, which he was. He's never built a wall before. He's never built anything on sand, and on the riverbank, it's all sand, and that's why it's sinking. It's collapsing. It's a horror show, and they violated the U.S. treaty with Mexico, and federal courts didn't didn't care, just let it go up.
And so between us and our
Just between you and I.
and our viewers, do you ever like see a butterfly like flying by and then just like a tear, like
a
single tear like from your eye, like knowing that you're fighting for that like butterfly? But in seriousness though, we are like one of the main channels for butterfly migration.
Right.
So that wall would interfere with a lot of these endangered.
It interferes with so much, and it's not just the wall. And then people say, "Well, they can fly over the wall." It's like that's not even the whole story. It's you're tearing everything up. They have a large concrete slab where the wall is, and it's not sufficient because it's only like 2 feet deep on sand, so it's not even sufficient. It wasn't built properly. But now you're cutting off access, and then they have these lights on constantly, which also affects the migratory patterns of these animals, whether it's the butterflies, other pollinators, birds, that kind of thing. So it just doesn't make any sense, and it's all to keep people from crossing over, and it doesn't even do that.
Wow, it's a crazy case.
It's crazy. Yeah, I can talk about it forever.
Now, let me ask you this. If you had a time machine and you could go back to your 18-year-old self, would you still decide to be a lawyer and do like what you're doing?
I can't think of anything else that I could do well that would keep me happy. Obviously, I don't like the paperwork as much as a lot of lawyers. But the fight, the arguing, the storytelling component, and helping people that are getting bullied, helping people that if they were left by themselves wouldn't be able to take someone on, and being that person that can help them, that's the one thing that keeps me going. If I was a transactional lawyer, I would have given up a long time ago. But that ability to help somebody who's being beaten down and stop that beat down and allow them to stand back up and defend themselves, that's something that I can't even describe how rewarding that is.
Thank you so much for doing like what you do, because
thank you.
Because you are like one of those lone like quasar stars in a galaxy that has very few. Because within the legal profession, I think most people think that lawyers, once you graduate from law school, you got to make money.
Right.
And money defines you. And most lawyers won't share with other people, but there's a big fear to not take on those.
Because it cuts off a lot of access to easy money. And I do want to clear up a little thing. It's not just me. Now, I take on a lot of these cases. They do come to me, and I am kind of, I guess, like the lead singer of the band, but I don't do these cases alone. Like the election contest case that we did, I had Carlos Escobar, and it wasn't for him helping. And we also had Marty from San Antonio.
Marty don't count. He's from San Antonio.
What's that?
He don't count. He's from San Antonio.
Right. Well,
he doesn't have to worry about getting run over while he's crossing the street.
And we've recently worked on the defamation case. I learned early on, because when I first started this, I was kind of acting as a one-man band, and you realize you're doing your client a disservice if you do that. And so I don't like taking all the credit because I don't deserve all the credit. The defamation case we just won, it wasn't me. I was a part of it. It was us, and we worked together. You did a lot of the paperwork, and you write better than I do.
No, well, to give you a lot of the credit, I was probably the gasoline, and you were the spark that was just, file this, file that. Let's do this. Let's do that. This is the way we're going to win it. Like, basically, you were like,
well, thank you. Yeah, but
the general,
it's a team,
basically,
and you can't do things like this alone. So I just want to make sure that I'm not taking all the credit. I mean, between Carlos and you and a couple other lawyers that we won't mention because they're not from the Valley.
That's right. Yeah, so you don't do it alone. So you have but there are more lawyers that are like doing it now, or
I think it's becoming. People have seen that we've been doing it and we're still around. So I think and you're seeing more and more lawyers take on these cases, which I think is a great thing, because the more lawyers we have taking these kinds of cases, the more lawyers we have bringing this to the courtrooms, so the public can find out what's going on, is better for the community. And the more informed we are of how the corruption works, the better the public is able to fight that corruption, answer that corruption, and find out that whether they're supporting the right person or not.
Well, Javier, how can people contact you if they wanted to like hire you or have a
The best way is just call my office, 383-0751, or send us an email at office@penalawfirm.com.
Okay, so you're not like the A-team whatsoever, because I figured like you were like this this mythical character that had no phone number, and like if you could find him, you could hire him. Well, thank you very much, Javier.
Thank you. This was fun.
I appreciate it with you coming on the show, and maybe next time we can have you back and talk about defamation.
Yeah, let's do that.